All right, I think we'll get things rolling here. Welcome to this ATARC webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about the predictive edge, how data integration transforms logistics. My name is Tom Suter. I'm the CEO of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel. I think you'll enjoy it. Anyway, ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. We're an organization that facilitates government collaboration, industry, academia, and we provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. This is our first webinar of the new year. I'd like to welcome all the attendees. Special thanks to Dr. Sabari Gupta, Jeannie Zepp, and the entire Electrosoft team for helping us put this together. This afternoon, we're going to hear from our panelists, followed by a Q&A session where we will pop in a few poll questions and answer some of yours. Before we begin, I just want to encourage the audience to submit questions in the Q&A section. I'll keep an eye on it, and then answer the poll questions that we're going to periodically put out so you can get your CPE credits. I would like to just briefly introduce the panelists so you know who they are, and then we will have each of them talk a little bit about what's going on in their organization, and we'll take it from there. Anyway, we've got Jeff Castro, Intelligent Robotics and Autonomous Systems, IRAS, at AI Data Program Analyst, U.S. Marine Corps. Welcome, Jeff. I guess you couldn't get your camera going, but I guess you're waving from behind the scenes there. Next, we have Travis Cutts, Enterprise Technology Solutions Manager at Electrosoft. There you wave. You're in the future modern, and I've been to your office. I don't remember them looking quite like that, but you got the future modern stuff. And Jim Palumbo, Command Information Officer at the Navy Facilities Engineering Systems Command at U.S. Navy. And you're standing up today. I haven't seen that. I like that. You know, maybe you could have your walk, your stepper or something, and do some exercise and stuff. I like that. It keeps everybody going. Well, let's just start the discussion. Maybe we'll start off with you, Jeff. What's going on in the Marine Corps, the intelligent robotics and autonomous systems kind of seems like you're a little more to the edge than most, but let us know about what's the latest and greatest in the Marine Corps these days.
Well, the latest and greatest is mostly AI and data, but understanding the foundation for everything, even robotics and autonomy, is the data. So I think we overlook the data portion because we're leapfrogging over AI and all the nice shiny objects. So my focus is more on the data because it is the foundation that supports everything we do, especially with the logistics, to be able to do predictive analytics and also do collecting data for meantime between failure, understanding the parts and the issues.
Yeah. For as long as I've been doing data, ATARC, we've been talking about data. What are some of the challenges? We keep talking about it. We've been doing this for a while. We haven't exactly solved it. What are some of the techniques that you're doing to, take these pools of data and get them in one cohesive, so you can get the data in one cohesive pane of glass?
Well, a lot of people want to put them all in one bucket. The issue
Mhm.
is understanding federation of data and orchestration of the data. It doesn't mean copying it all in one location. It's availability and the access to that data to do what you need to do. And then also getting down to something that most people don't talk about is database rationalization to consolidate. Everybody calls their database an authoritative data source, but when you open it up, 30 fields and only 3 are authoritative data sets. So we need to start looking a hard look at all these databases and we can consolidate some of them. And that's database rationalization. And if we get to that point, orchestration becomes easier and of that data. So we can actually have access and permissions and get to the data when needed, where needed. And also pulling off where we've got a data fabric internal to the Marine Corps, but those things help out. But and until then, it's implementation. Trying to break rice bowls. Tell people about database rationalization is hard. When you tell someone, "I've got an application and here's my database," they're not willing to give it up. And in this day and age with Power BI and everything, I told like TIFMIS, or we have one application, stop looking at it as an application or a service. Look at how the data needs to be displayed to make decisions. It could be through Power BI or any GUI interface. So we are slowly should be looking at getting away from a lot of application. How do we consolidate this data to make decision, especially for a COP or a SIP or a CTP or a common operational picture, a common tactical picture, or common intel picture. So that's how I see it. It's hard trying to move things, but it's trying to break rice bowls, and people. It's hard getting to move along. Over.
Yep. Thank you for that, Jeff. Um, let's go to Jim over at the Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command. Love to hear what you're doing. Of course, we have a big reemphasis by this administration on shipbuilding and increasing the size of our fleet. And, intuitively, you need to have better data to make better decisions and
Yeah,
resource allocation. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
yeah, absolutely. So, building off of what was just stated, rice bowls, I call them tribes because there's culture that's involved in each of the areas that we have here. So we have engineers, planning, designing, building facilities. We have public works, maintaining facilities, real estate folks that are responsible for understanding, what our property is, what the relationship with the local community is, environmental, et cetera. And each of them over the course of years came forward with money, and we developed, understandably so at the time, kind of unique data capabilities to support very specific requirements. But as we move forward, we're using the rationalization that was brought up previously. We're going through that as well. I'm kind of a Venn diagram person. So we're clearly laying out and understanding where are the commonalities across those tribes, across those rice bowls, and from a breaking those down, helping understand that if you take a common approach, that you'll actually be able to do your job better because there is data that you require in those other rice bowls in order for you to be more successful. You're absolutely correct. A lot of downward direction in regards to shipyards and looking at facilities and capabilities or potential capabilities that haven't been used for decades in some instances. So our planning, design, and construction community has been directed to go faster. So how can we use the gobs of data that is out there in order to speed up their processes to get us facilities up and running faster to meet the urgent need from a capability and potential adversary perspective. And that data comes in all forms, hard copies, to various data pools and data puddles, and figuring out how to integrate that. And I think we've made tremendous progress in regards to doing that rationalization that was mentioned earlier. And then from a building facility maintenance perspective, getting more predictive, using the data that we have out there. So instead of just doing a 100% going out and checking facilities based off the data that we have, let's get to the facilities, let's get to the equipment that is at risk in some way, shape, or form, and be proactive and predictive in our approach with maintenance. And then from a cybersecurity perspective, the adversary is very clearly shown capability and intent when it comes to negatively impacting control systems. So we're responsible for securing the control systems across the Navy. So taking that intel picture, mission criticality, and using data analytics to be able to focus limited resources on what will bring the most bang for the buck when it comes to defending our critical infrastructure. So a lot of challenges out there. We've made tremendous progress, but data integration is absolutely foundational for us to be successful.
I can ask you follow-ups on so many of the things you said. One of the things that kind of hit me is looking over historical data. I mean, I think we built 93 aircraft carriers in World War II, in 4 years, right? Some of this older techniques isn't even in the data resides in paperworks, right? Like I don't know when I put words in your mouth. I thought you were referring back to historical data like that, but the value you can get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Indo-Pacific, a lot of potential capabilities out there. So, understanding and from a data analytics perspective, what facilities can you bring to IOC, to FOC as quickly as possible, and prioritizing that and properly informing decision making at the highest levels in order to meet the capability requirements that we have in particular in Indo-PACOM, but obviously other places around the world. But specific to shipbuilding, being able to take legacy data, current GIS data, satellite data, modeling that out to be able to see, pretty much immediately what's within the realm of possibility from a shipyard perspective to specific, weapon systems, and informed decision making to align the resources to what's going to bring capability to the force as quickly as possible, and matching that capability up to the various weapon systems that we're trying to bring online as quick as possible. So, this location specific for aircraft carriers, this location specific for submarines, beyond what we already have in place, analyzing that data as quickly as possible and informing investment decisions to bring on shipyard capability quickly and effectively.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Travis is our industry expert. You see things across government, and you all have been doing this now for a while. What do you see out there that some of the challenges in the space? You're on mute.
I do apologize.
We need to hear your wisdom, Travis.
No worries. Good afternoon. Just want to say I'm an Enterprise Technology Solutions Manager and Data Integration SME with Electrosoft. Our proud sponsor today. Electrosoft, we support federal, civilian, and military organizations in advancing cyber resilience, achieving digital transformation, adopting agile approaches that improve operational efficiency and security. I do want to thank ATARC for hosting us, and welcome Jeff and Jim. It's a conversation about kind of my soundbite is warfighters' application of predictive analytics on integrated data to transform logistics operations, giving us the predictive edge. It's a mouthful. But what I really kind of want to hone in on, just from what Jim and Jeff both said, is there is that fiefdom that we run into. At Electrosoft, we do have a lot of customers where we are focusing their digital modernization efforts. And as we continue to do that, one of the approaches that I'd like to take I call the nuclear approach. And that's fission. We all know we get tons of power from fission, but that's separation. And it's those separated silos that lead to piles and piles of unused data. And that's the radioactive waste of that. When we talk about data integration, we're talking about fusion. We're talking about joining those things together. We're talking about joining that data together. And the power is tenfold that we get. So data integration, data fusion leads to more power, less radioactive waste of data sitting around not being used, no one knowing what to do with it. So I like to kind of give that analogy to break through some of those fiefdoms and those, if I have control of this data, then it makes me more valuable. The power and the value is increased as the data is integrated.
Yeah, that's I like that. I liked how you pictured that a lot. So Jeff, maybe we can go to you on based on what Travis said. How do we overcome this problem? I think he actually described it really, really well. This rice bowl, the puddles. I just need to get the information so I can make a good decision. And the other thing too is that sometimes the data is varying qualities. So you're going to combine all this data. How do you know you're making the right decisions? So I guess that's like two questions, but riff off Travis basically.
Yeah, a lot of it is just like knowing you got the right data. Also, our biggest concern is capturing tacit knowledge from our commanders. Lessons learned that don't not normally get documented, but a lot of things what Travis is talking about is we need to start identifying the authoritative data sources and combining them, or making the biggest thing is we combine them, but we do not give access or permission or knowledge of a whereabouts for an application or a service to get to it. Sometimes we either got to do it through an API or or direct ingest, but our issues become access and availability to the data. We could do all this underpinning, but if we don't give access and availability to the data, like using zero trust or permissions, it's all for naught. That's where we run into some of these policies, and people say, this is my database, this is my data. And I turn around and tell people, no, it's DoD's data, it's not your data. So until we can understand we don't own the data, it's DoD's data, how do we make it available and accessible to do the things that Travis wants to do as a company and help us out to consolidate or aggregate this data? But more importantly, we need to break down the policies or the access and permissions for availability and access.
Yeah, I like what you said about tacit knowledge. I mean, I think there was somebody set up a blog, Company Commander, where you had all the how do I defeat IEDs and those kinds of things. But then the unofficial one was the knowledge they had firsthand, right? Like how do you utilize their tacit knowledge? How does this work?
And,
In mixed in with the data that you get, right?
and that's the hardest part. We keep on talking about how do we capture the tacit knowledge. It's another percentage of data that's very important, and it's a lot of lessons learned. Things don't get captured on documentation too much or too often. So many times I set up tactical networks, and at the end of the day, they tell us that the exercise is success, but they didn't realize all the troubleshooting we had to do behind the scenes. So that is what I would talk about, is a lot of things are not being captured. And how do we know, going back to Travis saying, how do we know we got the proper data? And sometimes you don't know, and sometimes you just go with it. Even garbage data is relevant, because if you run analytics off of it, you can find anomalies and outliers in the junk data, and it could form patterns to do predictive or show weaknesses or vulnerabilities in your database or your application. Over.
Great. Jim?
Yeah, sure. I'll build off a little bit of that. So the first piece is, I'll talk about the policy piece. Experience back in my active duty time in the Air Force CIO, running the policy branch, and what was interesting was, as a CIO, we put policy out and then expect the entire Air Force to follow it. And again, back to kind of the tribes or the fiefdoms, those fiefdoms would, whether actively or subconsciously, throw up their walls to continue doing what they've always been doing. And so what that involves is, in the end, we can have the greatest technical solution, but it's still humans that you're dealing with, and you still have the human factor that you have to work through. So you got to go out there and you got to understand it from their perspective, what their challenges are, and what directs their action. So we actively partnered with other policy shops to put hooks in their policy that drives their personnel to do things back to our policy. And in particular, I'll use the example of the acquisition community and official programs. They had to officially show, if they were going to go do something outside of CIO policy, they specifically had to show how adhering to CIO policy was going to put cost, schedule, and performance at risk. And if they couldn't do that, they had to adhere to CIO policy based off of acquisition policy. So, understanding the other communities and what drives them, and understanding their policy and leveraging that and building those partnerships is absolutely critical. The other piece from that is getting out there and understanding the challenges and what those communities are trying to achieve can help you show the value that integrating data will bring to what they're trying to accomplish. As highlighted, their initial reaction is going to be anything along these lines is putting their data at risk, putting their mission at risk. And what you have to show is, in general, they usually have data requirements, data dependencies that are external to them in some way, shape, or form. And the fact that we're not integrated right now is slowing down their ability to accomplish their mission, making them less efficient, less effective. So, clearly highlighting what data integration brings from a value perspective to their mission set helps to overcome kind of that initial resistance that you'll see. And then, back to the technical piece, clearly understanding, and aligning the technical solution to those mission requirements, and being able to very clearly show the value the technical solution is going to bring to them, helps overcome that cultural hostility that you may face based off of them wanting to have total control, understanding that if they partner up, they're actually going to be in a better place in the long run.
Yep. I know we got a question in chat. I'm going to hold that for a second. I don't fear many things, but I fear us not getting the CP credit thing right, because we could lose our designation. So I need to get these poll questions in, because sometimes I forget and get in trouble. Can we put the first poll question on? Kind of basic. We work our way basic, and then move along as we ask these questions. Yeah, if everybody can answer questions. They used to not make the panelists be able to answer the question. I thought that was not great. Can we see some numbers? There we go. Okay, I think we got a fairly well-educated group here, and some people are just trying to learn about it, right? They're trying to learn about it. Let's go to the next question. I'm going to do all three in a row, because the last one I really like. We can talk about, are there ongoing data integration efforts into your organization? Okay, now I got to think on this one. I'm going to answer it too. So I know with myself and my own company, I recently took on a tag of AI transformation, but really you can't do anything AI unless you have the data. So just imagine, we're a big media company. We have like 30 databases, and how do we get this all to work? And it's crazy. I learn as much on these for my own job as you all do, I think. Can we pop that up? There you go. Travis, is this kind of aligned with what you see in the wide world out there?
It really does. Everybody has kind of an idea of what they're looking at when you hear about data integration. But I mean, for me to bring the focus back to logistics a little bit, something I'd like to kind of just talk about historically. We started out with a just-in-case logistics model. There was a lot of resiliency there because there was a lot of stockpiling. With that just-in-case models, we had everything on hand just in case we needed it. And there was a lot of waste associated with that. And that caused, in the logistics environment, us to move into that just-in-time model. And that just-in-time model is where we've sat for a long time, but there's not really the resiliency there. We're going to get it when we need it, but if something happens to the supply line, then we don't get it at all. So that resiliency was gone, but it was a very efficient approach. Now, with the implementation with AI in that logistics model, we move from just in time to regardless of circumstance. And in that regardless of circumstance model, we do see that the pendulum's kind of swiftly moving back to where resiliency is more important than efficiency. And that regardless of circumstance, based on the AI model, is allowing AI to not only forecast the way we did with just in case, but to have advanced intelligent forecasting so that we don't lose that efficiency at the cost of gaining that resiliency. And part of that, when we're talking about logistics, is really putting at the forefront supply risk management, making that more important than inventory and waste management.
Yeah, great, Travis. You're getting in some good setup. Let's go to Jeff next. I like the resiliency thing, because my son's a captain in the Army. He deals with this all day long on logistics. He's out in Germany. How do we, how much data do we need out there? We were talking on the prep call the other day about tactical cloud. Like how do I get the data to that warfighter in an efficient way possible, where I have to deal with sparse internet service. Talk a little bit about that and how hard that is, Jeff.
Well, a lot of times we also develop tactical cloudlets, how we engineer and design our networks that can easy separate from in a DDoS environment, MCON. A lot of times we got to deal in HF. A lot of times now with Starshield, Starlink, It's availability of SATCOM, LEO orbit SATCOM, and the bigger SATCOM. The issue is sometimes it's not always there. Sometimes we have to create and operate in our own environment, disconnected, running silent. So a lot of times we'll do reach back. Oh, hold on. We'll do reach back when it's there, when it's available. And even if it is when it's there and available, sometimes it's not always the right case to do it for exposure. So and then going back to Travis, what he was talking about, it is critical on how many parts we float. Sometimes we float a lot of parts, and all of a sudden we only utilize half of them. If we collect the data and start analyzing, but it's mission specific. So what region you are, you might consume more parts than other. But if you got to collect that data over time, at least it gives you a good model, and you can run the analytics and show what's actually I can float, and it gives me a 25% overhead, and I'm saving room for ammo, food, water, and people. So pretty much, I know I jumped from the tactical edge, but the tactical edge is critical. Edge nodes, how we run and maintain our data. Over.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim, I know on a ship a couple of years ago, an enterprising, I don't know if she was an officer and enlisted, built a Wi-Fi network and backhauled it with Starlink. She eventually got court-martialed because that was a very bad idea. You know, how in your environment, you know, the availability of the data and
Sure.
bandwidth, and how do you deal with that when the environment's changing all the time?
Yeah, we're going through that analysis right now. So you base it off of, all right, what are the wartime requirements, and then from a intel adversary threat perspective, kind of war gaming that out. What we're trying to work through is balancing it, because the knee-jerk reaction is based off of an individual exercise. All right, I need a Starlink or a Star Shield capability, and all right, yeah, but do you need a dedicated capability? How do we tailor it to the actual need across the entire command? So we're going through the analysis, so we right size it and don't have a tool set similar to what we were talking about earlier, a tool set sitting on a shelf, gathering a bunch of dust and pulling it out once a year for an exercise. That we're actually leveraging it for exercises, for real world, again, going out to, say, installations out in the Pacific, or locations out in the Pacific or out in Europe that might have limited or no connectivity. Let's maximize the use of it so we get all the taxpayers' return on the investment that we're making on that capability. And then the predictive logistics piece. So I touched on the predictive maintenance a little bit earlier. Kind of the old school approach was have your maintainers go out there and physically touch each piece of equipment in some way, shape, or form, and do 100% check. Based off of the limited personnel and the volume that you have, you're always behind. You're never going to get there. And if you treat the old axiom, if you treat everything as a priority, nothing is a priority, and you're going to end up reacting to a catastrophic breakdown in some way, shape, or form. And when it comes to control systems, when it comes to infrastructure, so HVAC, water, et cetera, a lot of times when that occurs, it is something dramatic. It's not a simple issue. A lot of that equipment is years, if not decades old. It doesn't go through the standard tech refresh that IT goes through. So it's absolutely critical to take the data that we have internal to NAVFAC, take the vendors' data, and then what was kind of interesting that was brought up from a supply chain perspective, I kind of see that as the logistics version of Intel. If we see that we've got some systems that are at risk in some way, shape, or form, and we also know that there's some risk out there in the supply chain, is there a way that we can be predictive and actually prime the supply chain in some way, shape, or form? So when a system does break down, we've actually, led the supply chain to actually fix itself and have the equipment on hand and ready to go to meet the need. So it's an interesting dynamic where, a partnership between us on the government side and on the industry side of sharing data, integrating data, across those fiefdoms or those kingdoms in this case, can bring benefit to both sides.
Yeah, great points. Let's talk a little bit about that supply chain, because it's kind of hard to talk logistics without supply chain. Supply chain's been a big deal for a long time, right? But we found out in COVID, I can't get my Amazon orders. That's when it became mainstream, right? Jeff, you want to talk a little bit about supply chain? Tactical radios. I don't have the part. I can't get communication going. Like, how can we, have just-in-time inventory, have enough but not too much, right?
Yeah, and a lot of things that I hate to say the word, we also look at it as a hybrid approach in foraging. I'm not gonna lie, on normal exercises, they know we're coming there. We set up a logistic contract with the in country we're doing the exercise with. So there's a lot of things. It's like, what do you do with radios? What do you do with the batteries? Storage. We do have issues. I'm probably going to go off a little subject. Technology wise, getting
Yeah.
away from lithium ion batteries, going to sodium or aluminum ion batteries, less volatile, longer life. We got to start looking at that new technology, so we're not taking as much as we need. Other than one radio having 3 additional batteries, we got to start looking at new technologies to help out with the logistics supply chain, to start getting more capable batteries or equipment that lasts longer, twice as long or 3 times as long. Battery lasting 24 hours, twice having to have 3 batteries. Things like that with technology would come into play to help out with the supply chain. Over.
Yeah, it's like supply chain's another data feed that you're going to need to make good decisions, whatever you're doing.
Correct.
Travis, you kind of brought up supply chain risk management. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts on it.
Well, I think one of the things that we're really looking at is using that AI to be predictive. I mean, that's the whole crux of this conversation at the end of the day, is getting that data in one place, breaking down those fiefdoms, looking at that data and being able to analyze it and say, what are we going to need and when are we going to need it? That's getting away from the stockpiling. That's getting away from the one chain of supply that may or may not come through for you. And instead being able to AI think our way out of using one chain of supply and having the stock that we need without overstocking. But one of the things that Jim had said that kind of really makes me think about another side of the topic that has to be brought up anytime we're talking about this data integration is the aggregation of that data. And that's where we start to talk about zero trust. We start to talk about the security of that data. Whenever we aggregate that data, it obviously increases our attack surface. But underneath that attack surface, there's still other areas that we need to be concerned with. And some of those things that we've had to kind of bring up as we try and modernize the data for the supply chain customers that we have. There's the NPE question. Applying the least trust to your AI, your APIs to interact with that data, making sure that they have to authenticate. And then really what got me thinking about it is Jim's comments on OT versus IT, that operational technology. If we're going to give a computer the ability to know what the temperature is and know what the temperature should be, are we at the same time going to give that computer the ability to change the thermostat? And does that cross that segmentation that zero trust requires? Then, of course, the other one that I really like to think about often is as we aggregate this data, poisoning the well. One piece of incorrect data or one piece of modified changed data by an adversary leads to a cascading repercussion of bad decisions, whether it be supply chain and logistics and having things where they need to be, or it be decisions made based on that data that we've aggregated and tried to make informed decisions about.
Yeah, I think we're making progress in enterprise on zero trust. I think the OT thing, and Jim's talked about it a little bit, the security. I mean, we have to talk about that. I think we're seeing in other countries, that's where we attack them, right? I mean, that's the first place you go. How big of a challenge? I'll switch it back to you, Jim. Before we had these standalone systems where you had to actually get physical access to a building. You don't need that anymore, right? and the companies are behind on that. They don't invest that much in security. How can we have this plan forward with the immense amount of facilities and OT gear out there, right?
Yeah, I think the zero trust approach is absolutely the right way, and I think it's creating a foundation to set us up for success, and it's makes it feasible and relatable to within DoD, within government, and to our partners outside the government. The OT environment, again, it created some unique challenges in regards to a lot of our systems are decades old. And when you go back to the kind of the first standing up of ICS SCADA back in the day, it was the perception was it's a zero threat environment. And everything was about connecting up and building those remote controls without any consideration from a potential threat. So obviously that created an opportunity for adversaries, and they've taken that opportunity and run with it. So across the board, everybody that has operational technology has been playing catch up. But I think we've made tremendous progress on that front, and have caught up. And zero trust is a big piece of that. Having a common approach where everybody's speaking the same language was absolutely critical, because you go back 5 years, everybody was kind of trying to do it on their own with different initiative, different approaches. Instead, today we're learning from each other, and that has dramatically sped up the process.
Yeah, just at ATARC, we have a zero trust working group, and we have an OT lab component that we've set up in Reston. We scoured eBay to get parts and things like that, so that vendors can demonstrate their solutions and how they alleviate that problem. Jeff, I thought you brought up a great point yesterday on APIs. Now that everybody's sharing their data, the API issue that was concerning to you to get that data. I think you're on mute. Yep.
Yeah, the API, it gets down to, we got API zombies, like we have VM zombies. Who's monitoring? Who's managing them? What is right and what's wrong? Turn them on. What is valid? The issue is everybody's got an API. Everybody's generating this stuff, but my biggest concern is management of these APIs, knowledge of the data flowing in and out the pipes, of access to data sets or data sources. So, and then going back to like zero trust, it's everything's trust, verify first, not trusted. We got to get to where our data can, the term I use, hide in plain sight, and it traverse the enemy's network to hide in plain sight. And I know this is not going to talk about quantum encryption and quantum key distribution and stuff, but that's the next level of encryption beyond zero trust. But it is critical that these APIs are managed and monitored, because everybody's generating them, and I have a feeling some are like zombies, like we used to have VM zombies in the back of the day when they started up. Over.
Yep. Good stuff there. We have a question. It's regarding Golden Dome. That's of course, that's $125 billion initiative that to protect ourselves. And we actually had a working group we just started around it. I think we're going to focus on integration. Ironically, I think that's the biggest challenge. What can we learn from what we're doing today to help out Golden Dome? Interoperability architectures, resilient operations, responsible adoption of emerging technologies. Jim, you run a big organization. This is even that on steroids. It's different Army, Air Force, Space Force. Like how, where would you begin on something like this?
Yeah, well,
I'll go back. Scale of interoperability.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm having to go back to my air staff time and engaging across with the other services. It's again kind of listen first. Where I found the most challenging environments in the Pentagon was when everybody had their talking points and all they cared about was getting their talking points across. And again, I'll go back to the Venn diagram. Don't focus on what you disagree on. Figure out what you agree on and build from that. And when you kind of start to listen and go, okay, we've got that same challenge. This is the way we're doing it. Maybe we can help there. What you end up finding out is you actually agree on a lot more than you realized. So, you know, it's kind of from a culture and a human factor approach. Just take a second, listen to what the other folks are dealing with. Now, you know, specific to NAVFAC, and no different than the other services, there are Navy installations that will be supporting Golden Dome in some way, shape, or form. We're just kind of going through the mission requirements, and but you know, back to the data integration piece, it's taking those mission requirements as they apply to a Navy installation and running that through from a real estate planning, design, and construction perspective. All right, what can we do with what already exists at an installation? Let's leverage everything that already exists as much as possible. What's the remaining gap? This is what we think needs to occur there. These are the resources that are required in order to make that happen. So, yeah, no different than everything else. I think there's a huge data integration piece that's involved with supporting Golden Dome, and the Navy will be knee deep in the middle of that.
Yeah, I think that's the first step rather than, oh yeah, we need this new system, that new system, this new. It's more of like, let's leverage what we have and putting it together. And Travis, not to brag on ElectroSoft, I know you guys really well. You've done these like cross-agency collaborations on identity and some other areas. So I know you have some experience in these kinds of things.
Yeah, so with logistics, we talk about a self-healing supply chain, but whenever we're talking about Golden Dome, we're talking about self-sustaining facilities. And I think that's really where Jim was going with that. And at the very beginning, we kind of have to start with what we've learned and start integrating those things at the very base level. Those AI sensors need to be in place as the building is being built, as the structure is being created. And everything needs to build on the data that you're going to get from those sensors and then allow those systems to take control. So really the self-sustaining facility, the self-healing supply chain, the self-securing network, all of those things I like to kind of give an alliteration to the simplest thing, you know, a Jeep on the battlefield. That Jeep containing a sensor, that sensor, it takes into account the use of the Jeep, the weather, the terrain, and it actually senses when that tire is getting old, when that tire is going to blow. It has automatic connection to data that says, do we have a local tire for this? Or do I need to go ahead and contact logistics and put an order in for a tire? Then you even take it to the next level of, okay, now let me analyze the supply chain and those vendors and say which vendor is most likely to get me that tire by this date at this good price. And then go ahead and schedule the installation of that tire. So building that from the ground up, when you make that Jeep, include that sensor. When you start building this facility, include that ability to use what we already know we're going to want it to do from the ground up.
Great. Let's go to the third poll question, because I think it really can guide us in our conversation based on what we get. What's the biggest challenge your organization faces in advancing predictive analytics? I guess you can't click on multiples, but I guess it's the most important one. I think some people want to click on all four, but who knows? Yep. Limited understanding of predictive, integrating data. So we have the leadership. We're not so worried about security. We kind of think we're working on that right now. The integration and standardizing data. Travis, I'll throw it back to you. What are the challenges there? What, you know, put yourself in a government part. What have you seen from your experiences from
Well,
that?
really, I think I think the poll kind of highlighted the biggest thing that I've seen, and that's really so much data. I mean, we've done such a good job. The
Yeah.
government does such a good job of getting all of this data and using it to make qualified, intelligent decisions. But when you take all of these disparate data sources and try and put them together, at the end of the day, it's finding out where they align. One data point may meet another data point somewhere in the middle, but you have to figure out how to align those data points to integrate them together. One of the things that I think is really doing a good job of that, I don't know, Jeff, if you're familiar with the STARS program, but that to me is really an amazing idea that they're actually looking at uh, the opinions of human beings on contractors, vendors, suppliers, and the AI is using a large language model to decide whether that's a negative opinion or a positive opinion, and it's making a almost human decision to then integrate that information into the supply chain. So allowing AI to almost use a humanistic approach to merge two pieces of data that we're not able to map is something that's really interesting to me. And that kind of hits home at the very nature of I've got this Excel spreadsheet with this 100 points of data. I've got this database with this other 100 points of data. Where do they meet in the middle? And AI can help us with that.
Okay, let's pull that thread because I was thinking AI. We start going into the AI piece. We've got all the data. We're pulling it all together. Um, Maybe we'll go with you, Jeff, next.
Yeah, it's identifying the anomalies and outliers. Some data might be garbage, and like I said before, it still can be useful. They form patterns in the way of life, like AI ops for cyber, knowing how to get ahead of the game before making a decision, put something in a honeypot before it starts traversing the network. It's just like that. It's more like the ontology, understanding the ontology of the data, the dependencies, interdependencies that we rely on that information. But the key thing is using AI and analytics, doing prescriptive, descriptive, and predictive analytics off the data, knowing what happened in the past now and what could happen. And those are the things we're looking in within a COP. That data is critical, pulling in METOC data, pulling in RF spectrum data, putting in terrain data to do route recons, or let the commander decide with at the information at his hands, at his fingertips, a lot faster, instead of waiting on the S2 or the 6 or the METOC saying, sir, this is the best route. He has it available right in front of him. Then he can go to his SME and say, what do you think? Cut down on time. It's reducing the cognitive load, but going back to identifying the data, the anomalies and outliers, and the ontology of that data and what it impacts to the final decision. Over.
And you don't have to do exactly what it says. I mean, right? You can. That's where your personal knowledge of.
Correct. That's where the commander's tacit knowledge. That's what he was hired. That was he promoted to. He has to make the hard decisions. So it is a piece of information to help him with a higher percentage of 80 or 70 or 90, that he makes good decisions based on his tacit knowledge with the combination. So it gives him another tool in the toolkit.
Yeah, yeah. Jim.
Yeah, going back to my old Air Force professional military education days, the way it works in my brain is the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act. AI helps do the observe and orient because the amount of data is just overwhelming to commanders and decision makers. But the ultimate decision and the action is on the human side of things. So AI taking that gobs of data, being able to analyze it based off of the direction that's been provided from the human side, and helping orient the decision maker so that the decision maker can make as an informed decision as possible and act from it. It's I don't see it anytime soon where you're the great majority of this, you're taking the human factor out of that on any critical decisions. That has to remain in place, and AI as a tool, no different than a lot of different things. Going back to the poll question, I answered the first one, which I seem to remember, was something along like, leadership not fully understanding AI in some way, shape, or form, and it's not from a lack of desire. Leadership is well aware of artificial intelligence and has a strong appetite for it. Where the struggle is keeping that appetite, or helping focus that appetite on what is truly going to work for the command, what's going to work for the mission. I call this AI fun times, because during the NFL playoffs, every other commercial is an AI commercial, and it makes it seem like it's pixie dust and will fix everything pretty easy. And as we've discussed here, there's a lot of work that has to occur in order for AI and machine learning to be successful, or it's going to be no different than bad data leads to bad decisions, whether you use an AI or not. And if you haven't done the work ahead of time, from setting your data up and establishing business rules and getting everything in place, you're just going to get to bad decisions quicker.
I was about to say, you're going to get to the bad decisions quicker now, even more efficiently.
Yeah.
Travis, any other things around AI you want to add based on what they said?
Oh, really kind of just building on some of that. So I really do think, as far as AI is concerned, that we're going to get to a point where we all have our own co-pilot. And the co-pilot approach is, you have that prompted AI companion assistant that you've built. It knows what your job is. It knows some of your data points that you're allowed to share. It knows your decision-making process. It's in tune with you, and it helps you kind of look at all of that data, summarize all of that data, and make what I like to call superhuman insights. We kind of have a hard time in our day-to-day jobs dealing with everything, and then also being able to go through volumes of data and integrate that data on the fly and then make a decision. But with that, I do want to state that something Jim was bringing up, the human in the loop. So we don't ever need to stray too far from the human in the loop. And when we're talking about logistics specifically in the supply chain, it's not that the supply chain professional is going to go away. It's that instead that they're going to be a strategic oversight. They're going to be exception management professionals. So as we adopt AI, we're not getting rid of that position. We're upskilling that position. So that's where talent management and upskilling our workforce is always going to be important. And it's going to be an add-on in addition to a superhuman addition to what we already have.
Yeah, I had an earlier prep call, and it was USDA, and they're rolling Copilot out. They got to train 70,000 people. Like, it's really hard to do these kinds of massive things. Jim, maybe we can go to you. Jeff has the exact same thing. We got to train everybody in Copilot. Fantastic. You want to add anything, like the challenge of getting the workforce? We got cutting edge people here, right? You all are experts in the field. How do we get this knowledge, essential knowledge, passed on? What are you seeing, Jeff, since you commented on it?
It's also about levels, basic level, advanced, intermediate levels. What officer level SES needs to know. If we overcomplicate it, eyes glass over. We need to keep it simple initially, like a 101. We developed prompting 101. We done some classes with Copilot and Microsoft. It was 2 4-hour classes on Teams. I said that is too long, and most leadership in uniform do not have 2 hours or 4 hours. Lucky to get 1 hour. So educating them on the modern tools, the enabling tools. We got Gen AI now. I've got all these LLMs like OpNav GPT. I've got the Army's Vantage. There's so much stuff out there, but at what time? I keep on looking at all this technology. We've got to pay for it, and the bill comes later. Especially with Copilot, it's not cheap, but it's a slightly different than the large language models where we got to port or do APIs into our environment. Copilot sits in our ecosystem, helps us mine our data and get better results, faster results. And if it only hallucinates, it's based upon you had garbage data that you had in there anyway. So but I didn't want to go too far into that, but That's what I see, sir.
Yeah,
Over.
I know the IRS put an LLM over all their data, and the data was fine. It was just conflicting. Like there's conflicting laws, so but they were always there, right? They were always conflicting guidance, so they found that out a little more efficiently and faster. To quote Jim. Jim, you want to add something here?
Yeah, sure. Know your audience. I mean, it's right along the same lines. If you're coming up with one single approach and trying to do it across your entire organization, you're going to succeed with about 5–10%, and largely fail with everybody else. And know your audience, tailor your approach to that. And sometimes that means you need to find a mouthpiece, somebody to proselytize from that community. So finding partners, finding folks that are already bought in, and bringing them on board as a tangential part of your team, and having them going out in their communities, because their tribe, their fiefdom, is going to find them credible, as opposed to the CIO coming in and dictating an approach to them in some way, shape, or form. And back to the senior leaders, what I found is most of them want to do stuff on their own. What they're looking for is a little bit of guidance, a little bit of direction, but they're going home and doing this stuff, or they've got 15 minutes here, 10 minutes there, in between a meeting. They're dabbling with the various AI solutions. So engaging with them, actively engaging with them, and providing them some feedback, receiving feedback from them, and kind of helping them guide their self-discovery. That's what I found, is a lot of them are doing this on their own. So where you can give them some guidance and direction, it can help speed up the process.
That's fantastic. We're closer to the end than the beginning here. Can maybe any final thoughts, any points of emphasis, something we didn't bring up on the webinar? Maybe we'll start off with you, Jeff, and we'll finish with Travis. Travis could take us home.
Not much. Going back to what Jim was talking about, leadership. For these tools, I need buy-in. If leadership is not using it, then everybody sees that and they're like, hey, I'm going to use something else. Buy-in is critical, from senior leadership, middle management, to buy in and start using it. When it's done that way, everybody jumps on board. But going back to what left off on here, to me, everything's about data. I look at it when we talk AI, data, and robotics and autonomy, I see an ecosystem. And if I can't operate within that ecosystem, I operate in a MagTab. Logistics is one portion of the MagTab. I've got to know the dependencies, interdependencies is going to impact my architecture, my network architecture, my comms architecture, to support it. And everything, I go back to what Jim was talking about, requirements and capabilities, because that's where we sit. I've got to meet the temporal requirements of that system, application, or the data throughput. If I don't meet the real time, near real time, I failed. So anything we drop in new technologies in our architecture, I've got to do DT and OT, and I've got to make sure it works within the ecosystem end to end. And if it doesn't, we fail at one point, and then we don't get something. And it doesn't matter how exquisite one part of the MACDAF is, it impacts throughout.
Yep. Jim?
Yeah, our challenge from a leadership perspective sounds like it's a little bit different, in that they're bought in. What we need, what we're working on, is making sure that they and take the organization with them. We don't end up too far over our ski tips with a AI solution, and we haven't done the base work from a data perspective. So we have a very expensive solution and don't have the data to feed into it in some way, shape, or form. So that, that's really, again, that there's a lot of work that has to occur in order for AI to be successful, and we're going through that process. And then really the only other thing is when Travis talked about everybody having their own AI co-pilot, I'm just glad I didn't have one in college, because I would not have had as much fun as I did. So.
Yeah, good stuff. Travis, take us home. Close this up.
Well, I think from the logistics standpoint, to use a term from there, buy-in. That's what we've just kind of finished talking about. And the Department of War's really push on Gen AI and trying to get everyone involved with it and using it. That's going to make it more familiar to all of us and actually teach all of us that it is a tool that's out there. That tool is going to give us the ability to predict, adapt, act faster. And that's what's going to take us from being the tip of the sword to the leading edge.
Great. That's a great way to end it. Thank you all. We actually are going to stick up one more poll. Do you need a certificate for your CPEs? You don't have to answer it if you don't care, but it's good. A lot of folks do this. Thanks again to our partners, Electrosoft, and this panelists. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Have a good stay out of the snow. We'll see where it is wherever you're in the country. It looks like we're all getting snow this weekend, but and
Yes,
also
we
have
are.
a public health sector summit next month.
We
So
actually
anyway,
hope for the snow.
what was that, Travis?
We actually hope for the snow. We hardly ever get to see any down here. So.
Okay. We need a good snow, I guess. Okay. Well, everybody have a good rest of your week.
You too, sir.